I started Wonder Egg Priority knowing about 3 things about it. 1. It's the source of that gif of someone feeling up some anime thigh. 2. It looks really cool set to Mr. Rage by Trippie Redd. And 3. The ending was very, very controversial. Enough to turn the entire public perception of the show sour. Going from being an absolute darling and one of the most hyped shows of the season, to one of the most talked about failures that year. That is a frankly terrifying thought, but still, I knew nothing about the show. I hadn't watched it when it came out, I was busy with college, and distracted by things like Attack on Titan the final season, and Beastars Season 2, and Jujutsu Kaisen, and stuff. But recently, I was going over shows that I'd missed and thought, fuck it, I've got a bit more free time now, let's see what's got everyone talking about it. So, I started watching, trying to forget the knowledge that it apparently gets really bad later on. And I enjoyed it. Stellar visuals, great quirky direction and style, a phenomenal soundtrack and compelling characters tackling very personal, dark issues in an unusually direct manner. I mean, there was the occasional odd line here and there that didn't sit right with me, but most of it was pretty good, I'd say. Enough to keep me invested in the characters and the show and the... Wait, why is episode 8 a recap episode? Thanatos? Wait, what the fuck is... Wait, what's this about robots? Parallel worlds? Wait. Who is this? Why do we keep focusing on her lips? Okay. Maybe the finale will sort things out. After all, it's nearly 50 minutes long. Let's give it a watch. Right, okay. Yes, let's, just, play the intro, please. Wonder Egg Priority is an anime that ran for 12 episodes from January to March in 2021, with a final 13th episode arriving in June. Animated at Studio Cloverworks, the show follows a group of young girls, Ai, Neru, Rika, and Momoe, all of whom are left reeling after the suicides of people close to them, until they're greeted by 2 mannequin things, Aka and Ura Aka, who offered them the opportunity to bring their friends back to life by buying Wonder Eggs. Eggs which contain other teenage girls who have recently killed themselves. The 4 protagonists must protect these girls in nightmarish dream battles that only end once the Wonder Killer, the unique representation of whatever trauma caused that girl to take the final, dreadful step, save enough people, and they might just be able to bring their friends back to life. Wonder Egg starts off strong, and I mean fucking strong. In addition to what I mentioned earlier, I have to commend its creators for having the guts to tackle issues like these in such a straightforward, blunt way. Suicide and mental health are topics that deserve to be talked about and explored in media, especially in a place like Japan. The fact that most of the main characters are girls also allows it to deal with issues unique to that demographic, which is nice, though I do think a lot of people, regardless of gender, will be able to relate to at least a few of the struggles the show portrays. Yes, it's not done subtly at all. In fact, subtle might be one of the worst words you could use to describe it. But something doesn't have to be subtle to be done well. Sometimes you don't need to wrap everything up in convoluted, shadowy metaphors. Oh, we'll get to you in a bit. Speaking of not subtle, I absolutely adore the weird, quirky, sometimes outright mad style and tone of the show. The oniric battlefields and wonder killers especially show this off masterfully, despite being at a glance too impossibly ridiculous and caricaturous to take seriously. The linking of these images to trauma helps us to ground the wonder killers and see them as actually threatening, even scary, and they act as nice little windows into the respective victim they haunt. It's a similar kind of appeal to the id worlds in Id Invaded, having these surreal, terrifying images representative of the scars of a person's psyche, It lets the audience gawk at these absurd, over-the-top visuals, while also using them to explore a character's nature and advance the themes of the show. And so it continues on for about 7 episodes of exceptional quality. Just episode after episode, hit after hit. I mean, there were a couple of things that stood out as weird to me, but just odd little lines here and there. But, I mean, they're never really focused on, so whatever, I can just ignore them. Honestly, the way things are going, this is an easy 8, 9 even. Okay, I've stalled enough. Let's get into why we're all here. After the suspicious episode 8 recap episode, Wonder Egg Priority kind of goes completely off the rails. Not necessarily in terms of visual presentation. Even though the production was very loudly collapsing behind the scenes, that barely shows up at all on screen. Even the special episode, which is clearly more limited than what came before, still looks great, especially if you don't know what to look for. No, the part of Wonder Egg that loses its coherency is its plot and themes, to the point that parts of it almost seem like the show's been written by 2 completely different people, as the second half of the show becomes obsessed with introducing and explaining all these science fiction and metaphysical concepts like parallel worlds, AI, and Thanatos, simultaneously oversimplifying the show and the issues it's talking about, as well as making them needlessly complex. It goes against the genuinely good stuff in the first half and makes you question the intentions behind it. Let me try and explain a bit better, starting with the topic of the female perspective is one that is obviously very important to Wonder Egg Priority. The narrative places special focus on the fact that most of the main characters are young girls. And while the show, I believe, has good intentions, I also... well, I don't want to make any assumptions about the writer, but I do have to wonder if he ran the script by an actual woman before sending it off.
Boys and girls' suicides typically mean different things. Men are more goal-oriented, while women are emotion-oriented.
Women tend to be impulsive and are more easily influenced by others' voices and opinions.
That line, said in episode 4, was probably the first inkling I had that this might end up being somewhat of a mess, and I hope I don't have to explain how fucking damaging it is. Unfortunately, that line foreshadows what appears to be the show's view of women as inherently more emotional and impulsive than men. I was able to ignore this for a while because everything else around it was so good, but it becomes impossible to ignore after the recap. After Frill. I still don't know what I think of Frill and her storyline. I think it could work in isolation, like as its own show, or if the existing one was structured and framed a little different. As in, the idea itself isn't completely dead in the water. There are aspects here that I find compelling, and it's all presented with the same great direction, music, and voiceover as before. It's just... it's just... excuse me. It is just... Okay, maybe there's some way you can frame certain aspects of Frill's plot as fitting in with the rest of the show, like, say, the damage that can be done to young girls by the men that idolize and even sexualize their demographic. Yeah, that could work, if you make a few assumptions about the writer's intent. But to be honest, even if that was the case, it doesn't change the horrifying impact that Frill has on the show's very premise. To try and sum up what she is, Frill is an AI created by Akka and Ura Akka, who, after killing Akka's pregnant wife because jealous woman, is trapped and sealed underground. And somehow, from there, she hooks herself up in this discount lane setup, and with the help of her AI creations, Hyphen, Dot, and Kirara Rodriguez matured 18 Evening Star SS Plum, becomes the living embodiment of Thanatos, or Todestrieb, the death drive, which is the real reason why suicides among young girls is so high, all because of one jealous little girl. I hope I don't have to explain the problem with having an issue like suicide be the result of some physical entity, or metaphysical entity, or whatever. It both overcomplicates and, more dangerously, oversimplifies the issue, presenting suicide as something that can be solved by beating this one obvious bad guy. The thing is, we already knew why each of the girls killed themselves. They say so in their episodes. They fight a literal embodiment of what it was that drove them to die. Why do we need this weird sci-fi-esque reveal? I can only assume that in wanting to explain the origin of the Akkas, they got carried away with explaining? I don't know, but the point is, it's something that didn't need to have this big, all-encompassing explanation behind it. To once again compare the show to Id Invaded. Spoilers for episode 9 and onwards of Id Invaded, by the way. Skipped the timecode on screen to avoid that. In episode 9, the power behind the Mizuhaname system, the machine that allows our protagonists to dive into the drives to kill of serial killers, is a young woman named Kiki Asukai. Kiki has a power, or rather, she has an affliction that causes her thoughts and dreams to bleed out into other people, specifically those who have experienced the urge to kill. The reason Kiki Asukai works and Frill doesn't is how they are framed by the story. Asukai doesn't act as a bow to neatly tie up loose ends. Her abilities are something that most people, including herself, don't understand, meaning her introduction doesn't overcomplicate things with unnecessary explanations. It's just an extension of the previous mystery of the Mizuhaname. It's a phenomenon, and crucially, one that, while very abstract, psychological, and metaphysical in nature, isn't framed as something supernatural, meaning that it still fits within the show's pre-established sci-fi aesthetic. Also, it isn't trying to explain away a complex issue like suicide. Frill, on the other hand, completely clashes with the rest of the show prior. Unlike Kiki, she isn't foreshadowed at all, and her mere presence actively makes the show and its message more hollow. I think that's honestly the worst part of it. The first half of the show has such good moments, and it has the balls to tackle these difficult, necessary themes in such a direct way, and for the most part it does a good job. But the second half makes me doubt the intentions behind it, which is probably the worst thing it could possibly do. So, I guess the only thing left to ask is, why? Why did things end up this way? How did this show get such a phenomenal head start, only to trip and burn at the end? Does it have something to do with the hellish production? One so bad that it needed an unscheduled recap episode? Could it be that the Frill storyline was planned for a season 2, but the production committee wanted the series to be wrapped up in one season? That can't be the case, because the finale doesn't wrap anything up at all. In fact, it introduces new plot lines. So, what was it? Well, I think the answer lies with an interview with the show's writer and creator, Shoji Nojima, from one of the Blu-ray sets. Thanks to Android Noob Baby and 2_face99 for posting and scanning it. The post will be linked in the description below. In the interview, Nojima, who it should be noted has never written for an anime before, is asked the following. Were there many discussions about the content of the script?
No, I didn't. I just kept writing and sending the scripts. I knew that the best way to make a good show was to give it to director Wakabayashi and his team and let them make it as they wanted.
Next is Nehru, who reveals new faces in the second half of the story, and which will lead to a surprising development in the end.
Actually, it wasn't set up that way from the beginning, but as I was writing, the story progressed, and as a result, the story of Frill was born. In the beginning, I was planning to finish this story in 1 or 2 episodes, but as the plot grew and grew, I realized I couldn't finish it all in just 12 episodes.
From what it sounds like, Nojima essentially wrote Wonder Egg Priority in isolation, then just sent the scripts off to the director and animation team with little to no instructions or clarifications. If that's the environment that this show was written in, then that explains a lot. On one hand, it's nice that the production committee didn't have much of a stranglehold on him and was willing to let him make the story that he wanted to make, but the fact that he seemingly had no feedback at all seems to have played a factor in how the series turned out, especially since it seems like he just kept writing without considering how to structure the series for a TV anime, a medium he admits he knew nothing about. He says that he realized he couldn't finish the story in 12 episodes, and I have to wonder where along the line he did so. because the jarring tone shift makes me think that he did so around episode 7, which caused him to try and set up the Frill plotline in an attempt to set up the sequel. Ultimately, and without making too many assumptions about Nojima's character, I think it was ambition and complacency that caused Wonder Egg to turn out as it did. The ambition to create this kind of show, and the complacency to believe that he could write it all by himself without talking to anyone about it beforehand or making any major revisions. Which is a shame, because if the series had just been a bit more focused, if it had had a second pair of eyes on it before it got sent out, God forbid a woman's eyes, I think I could be talking about why Wonder Egg was one of 2021's best new anime, rather than one of its biggest disappointments. And knowing that, I wouldn't blame anyone for just blowing it off and ignoring it. Having said that, I would still recommend that you watch it, assuming that you're okay with the subject matter. Though the ending is very muddy and very confusing, that doesn't invalidate the genuinely good stuff in the first half. And even in the second half, I think there's a lot to get out of it in analysing what works, what doesn't, and why that is. There's plenty to learn from Wonder Egg Priority's strengths and weaknesses, and I'd encourage any curious mind interested in an engaging, unique, if flawed experience to give it a shot. Assuming you haven't had your fill of Wonder Egg Priority, then be sure to check out clearandsweet, who you heard a few minutes ago playing the role of Shinji Nojima. He also has a video about Wonder Egg Priority, made in parallel to this one, though his is a decidedly more positive take, and touches on aspects of the show that I neglected to mention. You can find the link in the description below, but while I've got you here, I'd appreciate it if you'd like, comment, share, and subscribe to keep up with future endeavours. Right now, I'm working on a couple of different videos I hope to get out either this month or next, so keep an eye out for that. If you'd like to support me further, consider giving me a tip on Ko-fi, downloading my music on Bandcamp, or supporting me on Patreon, where you can get perks like being in the credits of my videos, access to director's commentary and music, and exclusive updates on videos, like this one. Once again, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.
Japanese people are tired of women